Hi, I'm Blake Gray, and I am here with Rob McMillan. He is the Executive Vice President of Silicon Valley Bank's wine division. He is one of the smartest, most informed people I know about the business of wine. He's who I go to when I want to learn about what the future holds for wine. And I guess a lot of us are wondering that very question right now. So, Rob, thanks for having this conversation with me. Tell me what you see as the short-term future of the wine business.
Yeah, it's the last 2 weeks since restaurants closed and we're in self-isolation. It changes a lot of things. And like the rest of the country, there's fear and confusion on top of it. So reactions are kind of I think a little different. But recognize that the wine industry, particularly the North Coast, on average, a winery sells roughly 30% of their sales through tasting rooms. So when you close that, that really hurts. But I start at the beginning when I start to think about this, and what I try to tell people is, you've got to think through this. This is a curve. This is a dip. It's a hole in the wall. Or a hole in the road. It's a pothole. And you got to get through this pothole. That's where you got to start. But if you back up to demand, people drink, whether it's good times or stressful times. And, all you got to do is look at what happened during Prohibition. People drank. They changed the way they distributed it. They changed the way they made it. But they drank. And we've seen the last several recessions. We've seen the same behavior. There's a period of time where consumption changes a little bit. It might drop in terms of sales growth, or perhaps this time it might even go negative for a period. But people drink. This is about channel shifting. So we don't have a demand change. We have channel shifting. And the tasting rooms closed right now. You see the wineries trying to focus a lot more on online sales. Some of the staffs in tasting rooms have been repurposed to the extent they haven't been laid off. And they're doing telesales. So they're doing what they can. And we've seen the what you would expect. We've seen channel shifting in grocery this last week. Nielsen just came out with the first real data that we've had, and grocery sales went up 27% week over week, and actually the same when you compare last year to this year. So we do see that channel shifting. To my point, people are still drinking. So now it's the job of the winery. It's the same job. The job is now to figure out, how you're going to get your wine to the consumer. It's the wine that they want, your wine, and then how you're going to sell it to them at the price that's going to work. And it's a challenge.
And when you talk about channel shifting, a problem with that for a lot of wineries is when people are buying all their wine in grocery stores, there aren't that many wineries getting their wines into the grocery stores, right?
That's right. Yeah, the ones that have been hurt the worst, though, are the ones that were selling mostly on premise, to restaurants and through direct to consumer. I have to say one interesting thing is that as I've talked to customers the last 2 weeks, 100% of them that had their spring shipments, they went very well. You would expect maybe people would, with the stock market and everything, you'd expect that cancellations to maybe make the spring shipments fall apart of it. And that's not been the case. So it also says, to the extent that we have customers, they're probably not the ones that have hit the unemployment lines of late. It's probably not hourly. It's probably not restaurant staff and things like that are generally the customers. And I think, generally speaking, the wine industry is still selling plenty of wine. The demand is there, but for an individual winery, it's a challenge. Anywhere between 40 to 60% of their sales have been cut off overnight.
Right. And I remember in 2008, people actually, if I remember correctly, volume sales went up, but the amount per bottle that people spent went down. Is that something you would expect this time as well?
It's hard for me to say. I think the same basic premise, happened. Back then we had a stronger level of demand growth. And coming into this, our demand growth was much, much lower. So it could go negative. I don't know. But it's the same factors. People will And we came into this year doing the same thing as well, is they're going to be looking for more bargains. And the wineries who have excess supply right now, we started off that way, they started off trying to figure out how to push that through the channel. And that means, rationalizing your production and figuring out how to maybe you don't discount your top flagship brand, you make less of it. And you take some of that juice and you put it into a second label, you sell it off into the secondary market. There's a lot of mistakes you can make at this point for sure, but you don't really take down your flagship price that much. Although right this second, when we need cash, that's where we are today. We have to get through this dip.
So it's actually a pretty good time for consumers to buy wine. Like a winery's second label might be better than usual. I understand wineries are offering free shipping that didn't offer free shipping before.
Free shipping is normal right this second. I was just looking down a spreadsheet of about 150 offerings, and almost all of them have free shipping, which is very expensive for a winery. We're shipping liquid. It's heavy. But that's normal. And there's free bottle when you buy 11, there's 15-20% discounts. But you don't see a lot of 50% off, but for people in the know and connected, you can find some pretty good bargains. I just before I got on here had to, I'm drinking a bottle every night. I'm doing my part here, working.
I do my part too.
And I'm out of my everyday wines. I have my other ones, but I don't want to drink those every night. That'll make me poor really fast. And so I bought a case of a really good $20 wine, a red blend out of Washington, and it was free shipping, so $20 free shipping.
Nice.
Every day, I can do that.
Nice. Now, let's talk a little bit about the macroeconomic situation for the wine industry before this even happened, because in January, we were talking about tremendous oversupply. How is that affected by what's going on with the industry right now?
Well, it's made it worse. We started to see the bulk market pick up. There was in January, there was kind of an immediate response that we'd seen earlier in 2000. Actually, you want to go back that far to the tech bubble, and that's when $2 Chuck started. And way back then, there was, if I'm remembering correctly, there was like 400,000 gallons of Napa Cab that was sitting out there unsold, and that's where $2 Chuck came out of the market and with a splash. And I have to say it was pretty good, but it took about a year for Fred Franzia to put that whole thing in place. This time, and I don't know whether Fred had anything to do with it, but all of the wine that was out there, the cab anyways, in Napa, that got sucked down in January, the lower end stuff. And it went into something I have no idea what, but $2 Chuck in the meantime had gone from $2 to $3 pretty much, and now it's $1.99 again. So that it kind of tells you what's happening to price at that level.
Bulk wine is cheaper.
Yeah, it is cheaper, so now, just like everything with when you have this kind of a shock, financial shock, it kind of freezes up everything in its place. So there's nothing. There's a little bit of transaction that's happening with the bulk market right now. Not a lot, but there, like I said, there is still demand. So the larger wine companies are finding good juice and they're pulling that down. There's no activity on the grape market right this second. Trying to get contracts written is a little bit difficult. Everybody's trying to find where equilibrium is.
Yeah, well, I imagine that's a whole issue with farm workers, right? I mean, we don't know when whether there are going to be farm workers available, when they're going to be able to get in the vineyards. It's going to be a big issue for vineyard owners this year, right?
Well, it's an interesting thing. With this crash, the very first thing that happened is that, as I said, wineries trying to figure out how to protect cash to get through this dip. The very first thing that they did, the vast majority of them let go of all of their hourly staff. And just before that, I want to go back to the good old days, 45 days ago. uh, one of the biggest fears was labor. And so how odd to 45 days later be letting people go in mass, hence the 3.5 million new ads to the unemployment rolls this week.
Mm.
And I'm sure it'll be much worse here this next week, by the way. It's just fact. So there's going to be a much bigger labor pool available, whether it's suited for the right things. We'll have to see. I'm not really tracking right this second what's happening with the H2A program. I don't know that that's going to be much of a help, and I don't, with what's happening in locking down borders now, really across countries. It's not just Mexico, but Canada and the Central America. Everybody's trying to freeze their borders to protect the movement of the virus. So I'm sure it'll cause some problems.
Yeah, maybe it'll be like Tom Joad in Grapes of Wrath, and we'll find out if native-born Americans will actually pick grapes.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I've tried it. It's pretty hard.
I'll have to be pretty desperate before I pick grapes for money. So another macro question, long-term issue that you've been following for a long time that I'm curious if you have any thoughts how this might affect is millennials adopting wine. Because you were saying just in January that the wine industry keeps expecting millennials to start drinking more wine. And it's not that they don't drink wine, but they're not drinking as much wine as previous generations as they hit the same age. How does this affect that?
It doesn't. It's an unnatural economic thing, and so you can't judge really anything based on this unnatural thing. We'll have to get back to a natural state, and that will happen. This will end, and we'll get back to a natural state. And where we were at that point was, and where I left off. Actually, my last speech was a keynote speech up in Washington for the Washington Wine Industry Conference, and it was an interesting time. They had just had their last or their death that had just taken place up there. So there was about a third less people, but the industry in and of itself. Oh, I lost my train of thought. Ask your question again.
Millennials, are they ever going to start drinking?
Oh, thank you. So where I left off in that speech was I was showing pictures of wine bottles, and we have like long days and cool nights and pH and soils and all the stuff that we sell, and yet the thing that the young consumer is looking for is natural, organic, non-GMO, things that relate to health. That's the way everything else is sold. And as basic as calories are an important part of health. They want to track young people and older people, for that matter. They want to track how many calories they're consuming. And even though the TTB has voluntary label where you can put calories and proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, we don't do that. The other thing we're making a mistake on from our labeling is you look at the backs of labels that just have these big, long stories, and nobody reads that. There's not a single person that reads that, not us, and not the youngest. They don't have time. And so we have to get to this place where we're using much more pithy ways of doing things, and probably use more emoticons and pictures effectively to explain our story, because we got about a couple of seconds maybe to grab that consumer. And that's just one of many, many problems with the way we market. We really do have to change the way we sell and market to attract this young consumer. And the spirits industry has got a long head start on this, and we can copy them in a lot of ways. And that's the way we have to go.
Thank you. This is all music to my ears, because I've been wanting to see ingredient labeling in wine for many, many years, and the wine industry as a whole is against it, but it would reward the people who aren't adding crap to their wine. And it would be incentive for people who are adding crap to their wine to stop doing it.
And you think about I mean, it's the oddity is, what is the consumer looking for? Well, they're looking for natural, or they're looking for, things that have a sense of place. They're looking for artisanal, they, few ingredients. That's what's kind of driving, in part, that's what's driving this white claw phenomenon is, it's got ethanol and soda water and flavors, and that's it. And there's nothing on the back label that you can't pronounce. And sadly, is that when you interview, you find that people that consume both wines and White Claw, they think White Claw is more healthy for them. And when you think about what goes into wine in terms of its natural, is it natural? Well, if you put wine in grapes in a glass and you smash them, it's going to convert because to wine. I don't know exactly how the quality is going to turn out if you don't do anything to it, but it'll convert to wine all by itself. So, when you want to put ingredients in your wine, smashed grapes. I mean, sulfites added, whatever. it's another question, but we just don't market in a way that is makes any sense, honestly. And we've got to change and meet that customer. We don't have to change the elegance. We don't have to change, the fact that we're selling a luxury product if we're at the high end, but we've got to change the way we sell.
Let me ask you about that, because I think it's very sensitive for wineries now. I had an email this morning from a food writer friend who was outraged at an email she got from a champagne company. And I looked at it and I said, I don't have a problem with this. They're just telling you that their champagne is available and you can order it at home. But she said, oh, it's not the time for that. But this is an issue that every winery has to be thinking about right now, is that how do I reach out to my customers and not have the reaction that my food writer friend had? I mean, you deal with the wineries on a daily basis. I mean, do you have thoughts on this and what wineries can do?
Well, yeah. So, my basic tenet is that your job as a winery is to find your customers and sell them your wine. That's what they desire at the right price. So, lining all that up is complex, but that's always your job. And today it's even more complex. But a lot of the wineries are doing telesales. They've repositioned their tasting room staff to the extent they haven't let them go, and they're doing telesales. They're connecting with their clubs, and I have to say one of the interesting things is that we've seen 100% of the club sales go very well this year. So that's a nice thing, and generally speaking, as I'm talking with all of my clients and non-clients this last 2 weeks, they're all telling me that the folks that are home, they're actually picking up their phones. If they're in their office, they're busy and they don't pick up their phone. But at home, they're having different conversations just because the location has changed, and they're so starved for social interaction that they're happy that the winery is calling them. So, but I have heard the other. I mean, but you can't manage to the lowest common denominator. You just say, well, you had that kind of a problem. You say, oh, I'm sorry. I know we're all going through hard times. We'll look forward to better ones. Goodbye. That's just going to happen.
Yeah, I've had this discussion with other people that there are some people who are going to be just negative about the idea of selling wine under any circumstances. So, but those aren't your customers. But that's the other question. You're talking about, you think wineries should get in touch with the people on their mailing list, people in their clubs, and that makes sense. What can they do about new customer acquisition right now?
Yeah, it's more difficult because you can't get on planes to travel. And there's a lot of things you can't do. You can't do pop-ups, so it's certainly more difficult. I don't have great answers for that. If you were on top of things and you had really good hygiene with your data and you were doing a good job of collecting names of everybody that came in into your winery over time, even though they're not in your club, you can have success right now because people do want wine.
Hmm.
But trying to go find new customers in a point of crisis is pretty complex.
I have to think this is going to be
Data helps.
the big companies, Gallo, Constellation, Treasury, Wine Group, they're going to do great because people want wine, and that wine is what's out there in the stores.
Yeah, and they're growing. It's I don't know if I mentioned, but it's 27% growth this last week.
Yeah.
There'll be more coming this next week.
So another question, and this is right in your specialty area, mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah.
I would imagine there are going to be some pretty desirable winery properties on the market real soon if they're not already. Would you say that's right?
No, you can't judge any market by this dip. Um, and this happened actually in 2007, 2008 too. Immediately, there were people that were flooding into the Napa Valley in particular, and saying, I want to buy your troubled loans, and I had to tell them back then I don't have any, and they said, oh come on, that's bull. I said, I'm telling you the truth, I don't. I said maybe there's some out there, but I don't see them. But people make the mistake of thinking that when we get to a difficult time, that the Napa Valley or anywhere in the North Coast for that matter is going to go on sale. It's a long-term asset, and the other thing you got to remember is there are a lot of crazy, passionate people out there that they would love to own one of these wineries. And so when you get to this point in time, they don't discount them to sell them. People line up, and so to the extent there's any available, I don't think you're going to see discount. But to your point, right now, I know of 3 transactions that are fairly substantial that were in process, prior to this, and we'll see if they close. And one in particular that I know of is has been in process for so long. These people have been very diligent about the way they've approached it, and this is the asset that they want. So I think it'll still close, but you get to these times where there's questions about financing. Um, the financial system is impacted, if nothing else, just from a personnel standpoint, with the number of people working from home, or like me in the Louvre or wherever I am. And
that's not really behind you. That's not really there, because this is
really,
oh
yeah.
Background. I'm not that smart.
No, this is me. That's me. I'm in the Louvre.
Why not? Nobody can see it but you and the penguins.
Yeah, exactly. But I think we'll have some of these transactions probably drop out, and when we get to the other side, we're going to have some damaged wineries for sure. I don't know if everybody's going to make it through with no sales, for 90 days. But these guys are resilient, and I've always been impressed with their ability to withstand and be gracious in the face of disaster. So we'll see some sell, but I don't think we're going to see any sort of a rush.
I mean, this is a saving grace for wine in general, is that it's a long-term industry, right? That people are selling wine right now that they picked the grapes in 2017 or whatever. So
we'll get through this. It's difficult. There's never been a more difficult time in the wine business than right this second. Nobody's got a playbook. We've got some things that you can rely on. I have my 94-year-old mom who lives with my wife and I here, and she's sharp. She's still in good shape. And I asked her, I said, Mom, have you ever seen anything like this? And she said, nope. Born in 1927. It's not, so it's unique, and we're got to fight our ways through this. And it takes a lot of conversation, a lot of talking, idea generation. We're all trying to find our way. And these kind of things, Blake, I think interviews, I think this kind of thing helps.
Well, thanks. I mean, that's why I'm doing it. And I really appreciate your taking time out of your valuable day, because I am like the least important of the people you're going to speak to on Zoom today. So thanks for joining me. This has been Rob McMillan, and thanks for the conversation.
You bet. Take care.